You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts now.
I'm back. Rudrance for Black and White Sports. Well, we're going to talk about Bubba Wallace and Kyle Petty. Now, in case you guys hadn't been paying attention, Bubba Wallace slid into a playoff spot by the hairs on his chinny chin the other day. Massive wreck in that NASCAR race, the Coke Zero Sugar 400. Niner in there. Anyway, there was a massive wreck. Somebody had to be hospitalized. Bubba Wallace slipped into the playoffs. But prior to the race, NBC Sports analyst, NASCAR analyst, Kyle Petty, who has been very unapologetically critical of Bubba Wallace, as well he should be, particularly surrounding that Kyle Larson bully incident when Bubba Wallace not only ran his car into him and then got out of the car and viciously attacked Kyle Larson. There were calls for actual criminal charges to be put on Bubba Wallace over that incident. Well, that didn't happen. There were calls for McDonald's to drop sponsorship. That didn't happen. Kyle Petty was one of the few members of the mainstream media that was willing to go out there and say, you know what? And I'll just show it to you right here. A little reminder of what Kyle Petty had to say. And my gut feeling is Bubba Wallace decided to be a little petty here because he didn't want to talk to somebody who unapologetically doesn't try to cover his ass. By the way, I think we found that NBC Sports tried to cover Bubba Wallace's ass here because I've got video of him being critical of Bubba Wallace and smashing him for not doing that interview. But I'm going to show you something that's interesting about that. Let's take a look. This is what Kyle had to say last year about the Kyle Larson incident.
He should have been suspended for the rest of the year.
Wow.
Rest of the year. Okay. He drives for Denny Hamlin, who has been vocal about safety. His teammate, the only reason he's in the 45 car is his teammate's career was all but ended because of an accident in this car that the drivers has vocalized that it needs to be safer. He turns a guy in the right rear into the outside wall intentionally. Steering brake, that's laughable. Okay, turns a guy into the outside wall, then walks across the racetrack. First, you intentionally wreck somebody. That's a suspension. He's walking across the racetrack and cars are going by him on both sides. That's not safe. That should be another suspension. Physically.
Okay, so we'll just cool it right there. But that was in the Kyle Larson, situation. That was his take on that. All right, and a lot of your new quote-unquote woke NASCAR fans, and I'm still trying to figure that one out, woke NASCAR fans, the Bubba Wallace defenders, they have been pissed off at Kyle Petty ever since that because Kyle Petty went out there and said, boom, the suspension was too light. He should have been gone for the rest of the racing year. Now, I'm going to show you something rather interesting. This is the article and the video where you see Petty, Wallace refusing interviews is unacceptable. Now look at what happens. I click on this. Page not found. Now I got to be honest with you. That looks like, and I did find the interview, don't worry. But this looks like NBC Sports put up an article and then they saw the wokes on the X, artist formerly known as Twitter. They saw the wokes getting ass hurt over Bubba Wallace criticism, and they yanked the article down with that headline. It's gone. Well, here is Kyle. That's Kyle Petty right there. This is what he had to say. Okay, and Bubba declined the interview, and it was surrounding the playoff situation involving Bubba Wallace because Bubba was in jeopardy of not making this playoff field. With the 16th playoff spot hanging in the balance, Bubba knew he needed to fend off 16 other drivers eager to seize the opportunity firmly in his grasp. However, amidst the jubilation and anticipation, a surprising voice of criticism emerged. In a podcast, racing veteran Kyle Petty harshly criticized Wallace's decision to forego interviews before and after the race. And I mean, he crushed him. Kyle Petty's sentiment resonated with a broad narrative of pressure and expectations that accompany professional sports. During the NASCAR on NBC podcast, Nate Ryan queried the panel about Wallace's behavior, highlighting instances where he declined interviews even after essential races. This was made about other drivers like Chase Elliott, who readily engaged with the media despite the stress. And this is what Kyle Petty had to say. Let's just listen.
Bubba says that this is on his Mount Rushmore of racing achievements next to his 2 Cup wins. Encapsulate what you saw the entire weekend from Bubba, and is that pressure? I know we've talked about before, but how does he get past that? Like, because I mean, I don't want to be critical of him, but at the same time, I mean, Chase Elliott did interviews before the race and after the race.
Yeah.
And Bubba did an interview after the race, but I just feel like at some point you got to accept that, like, hey man, like, this is part of the deal. You got to talk to the media, even if you're feeling all that stress.
Listen, for professional athletes to refuse interviews is unacceptable in any game. Unacceptable to your fans, unacceptable to the sport. It's just not. Ty Gibbs did the same thing. He didn't want to do an interview. And I don't know how these guys think that's acceptable in any world, because that's what you're here for. That's what you're here for. That's what they pay you the money for. You know what I mean? That's what, and that's that stupid saying. That's why you make the big bucks, dude. You got to handle it. Put it on your shoulders and carry it. If mentally he is that fragile, then maybe this is not the game for it. You know, honestly. And it was interesting to talk to Brad about some of this.
Wow. So he just come out and said, if you can't handle the interview, if you can't handle the pressure of this, then mentally, maybe NASCAR is not your game. Now, keep in mind something in all this. Bubba Wallace has been very outspoken that he suffers from anxiety and all these other kinds of things. Now, of course, the wokes online turned this into an issue involving white people in race. That actually came into it. It's going on right now on X. The toxic nature of Kyle Petty being the white guy, criticizing the only black guy that has to carry it all on his shoulders. Oh, cry us all a GD River, for crying out loud. Stop it. Here's my issue. He's right. Number one, he's paid very well. Number two, and this is a big one for me, far as I'm concerned, you got people out there betting on this sport and betting on these races. You deserve and you need to know the state of said driver that's going to be out there driving around one of these tracks when people are spending their money. If you're going to be allowed to bet, you're going to be allowed to gamble. The mental state of a driver should be fair play. Plain and simple. Guess who had unbelievable mental strength to push through when things got stressful? 23XI's owner, Michael Jordan. A great example of that. Tom Brady, another one. For crying out loud. You want to put yourself out there as a professional athlete, the mental side of this is fair game. It's part of the job. It's not only athleticism, it's not only skill, but the mental side. To handle that pressure on you, you got to be able to deal with it. Plain and simple. I mean, truly. And the idea that people shouldn't talk about that or whatever, horse shit. I mean, this whole thing is about a bunch of coddling anyway. And the fact that headline by NBC that page got removed. Now, I understand the interview is still up under a different headline, but it's a much cushier headline. I mean, that's what playoff pressure weighed heavily on Wallace is the new, lack of a better way of putting it, more candy-ass headline that looks a lot more less aggressive towards Bubba Wallace. Unbelievable. I mean, come on. Get real. Get real. And Bubba Wallace, win some races. You know, you want to shut everybody up. You want to shut up the criticism. Go out, win races. He doesn't win. Let's just be real. That leaves you open to a lot of criticism. You know, pulling a fake news hoax is another thing that will open you up to criticism. And, yeah, a lot of fans won't be on board with you ever after that kind of crap. But you get the point here. Hell no, Kyle Petty's not in the wrong. Not in the wrong. Good job, Kyle Petty, for having some testicular fortitude, being in the media, for calling out somebody that obviously people want to put in an insulated bubble because he's black. Horseshit. Nobody, I don't care who you are, if you're involved in a sport, is above criticism. If you're in the media, you're not above criticism either. Nobody. I'm not above criticism. Nobody is. I don't want to hear that. So, anyway, tell me what you think, black and white sports supporters. Are you butthurt that Kyle Petty just kept it real and said, Bubba, quit being a titty baby, man up, and sat down and talked to somebody for 2 or 3 minutes? Instead, I'm going to be off doing an interview to the side like we saw months ago. I'm going to flip somebody off because I'm pissed. We've seen a fragile state. And the other thing we hadn't talked about in all this is the fact that if you're going to drive a speeding bullet around a racetrack, I need to know where your mental state is for the safety of everybody else, the other drivers. I mean, I'm sorry, but if I'm a NASCAR driver and I know Bubba's that fragile, I don't want to drive around his ass, frankly. You might be a danger on the track. You're going to have a meltdown and crash that car into somebody like you did with Kyle Larson because you got mad and turned your car into a potential weapon? Anybody? Tell me what you think. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
Thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next time on Black and White Sports.